Audio check, one, two. All right, so many technical difficulties happening, but the show goes on. So I was saying we have been going through the book Who Moved My Cheese, and it's a very fascinating book that deals with change that is happening all around us. All around us, there are changes. And what we hope to, or what we will discover, is that the best course of action to take is to adapt to the changes that are happening and make a bold step forward. So, tonight we're going to continue, and this section is entitled A Gathering. Let's go. One sunny Sunday in Chicago, several former classmates who were good friends in school gathered for lunch, having attended their high school reunion the night before. They wanted to hear more about what was happening in each other's lives. After a good deal of kidding and a good meal, they settled into an interesting conversation. Angela, who had been one of the most popular people in the class, said, "Life sure turned out differently than I thought it would when we were in school. A lot has changed." "It certainly has," Nathan echoed. They knew he had gone into his family's business, which had operated pretty much the same and had been a part of the local community for as long as they could remember. So they were surprised when he seemed concerned. He asked, "But have you noticed how we don't want to change when things change?" Carlos said, "I guess we resist changing because we're afraid of change." "Carlos, you were captain of the football team," Jessica said. "I never thought I'd hear you say anything about being afraid." They all laughed as they realized that although they had gone off in different directions, from working at home to managing companies, they were experiencing similar feelings. Everyone was trying to cope with the unexpected changes that were happening to them in recent years, and most admitted that they did not know a good way to handle them. Then Michael said, "I used to be afraid of change. When a big change came along in our business, we didn't know what to do, so we didn't adjust and we almost lost it." Can you relate to any of this right now? I'm sure many of you can. "That is," he continued, "until I heard a funny little story that changed everything." "How so?" Nathan asked. "Well, the story changed the way I looked at change, from losing something to gaining something, and it showed me how to do it. After that, things quickly improved at work and in my life. At first, I was annoyed with the obvious simplicity of the story because it sounded like something we might have been told in school. Then I realized I was really annoyed with myself for not seeing the obvious and doing what works when things change. When I realized the four characters in the story represented the various parts of myself, I decided who I wanted to act like, and I changed. Later, I passed the story on to some people in our company, and they passed it on to others. And soon our business did much better because most of us adapted to change better. And like me, Many people said it helped them in their personal lives. However, there were a few people who said they got nothing out of it. They either knew the lessons and were already living them, or, more commonly, they thought they already knew everything and didn't want to learn. They couldn't see why so many others were benefiting from it. When one of our senior executives, who was having difficulty adapting, said the story was a waste of time, other people kidded him, saying they knew which character he was in the story, meaning the one who learned nothing new and did not change. What's the story? Angela asked. It's called Who Moved My Cheese? The group laughed. I think I like it already, Carlos said. Would you tell us a story? Maybe we can get something from it. Sure, Michael replied. I'd be happy to. It doesn't take long. And so he began. And so we're beginning tonight. Who Moved My Cheese? The story. Once, long ago, in a land far away, there lived four little characters who ran through a maze looking for cheese to nourish them and make them happy. Two were mice, named Sniff and Scurry, and two were little people, beans, who were as small as mice, but who looked and acted a lot like people today. Their names were Hem and Haw. Due to their small size, it would be easy not to notice what the four of them were doing. But it, but if you looked closely enough, you would notice the amazing things. Every day the mice and the little people spent time in the maze looking for their own special cheese. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, possessing simple brains and good instincts, searched for the hard nibbling cheese they liked, as mice often do. The two little people, Hem and Haw, use their complex brains, filled with many beliefs and emotions, to search for a very different kind of cheese, with a capital C, which they believed would make them feel happy and successful. As different as the mice and little people were, they shared something in common. Every morning they each put on their jogging suits and running shoes, left their little homes, and raced out into the maze looking for their favorite cheese. The maze was a labyrinth of corridors and chambers, some containing delicious cheese, but there were also dark corners and blind alleys leading nowhere. It was an easy place for anyone to get lost. However, for those who found their way, the maze held secrets that let them enjoy a better life. The mice, Sniff and Scurry, used the simple trial and error method of finding cheese. They ran down one corridor, and if it proved empty, they turned and ran down another. They remembered the corridors that held no cheese and quickly went into new areas. Sniff would smell out the general direction of the cheese using his great nose, and Scurry would race ahead. Got lost, as you might expect, went off in the wrong direction, and often bumped into walls. But after a while, they found their way. Like the mice, the two little people, Hem and Haw, also used their ability to think and learn from their past experiences. However, they relied on their complex brains to develop more sophisticated methods of finding cheese. Sometimes they did well, but at other times their powerful human beliefs and emotions took over and clouded the way they looked at things. It made life in the maze more complicated and challenging. Nonetheless, Sniff, Scurry, Hem, and Haw all discovered in their own way what they were looking for. They each found their own kind of cheese one day at the end of one of the corridors in Cheese Station C. Wow. Every morning after that, the mice and the little people dressed in their running gear and headed over to Cheese Station C. It wasn't long before they each established their own routine. Sniff and Scurry continued to wake early every day and ran through the maze, always following the same route. When they arrived at their destination, the mice took off their running shoes, tied them together, and hung them around their necks so they could get to them quickly whenever they needed them again. Then they enjoyed the cheese. In the beginning, Ham and Haw also raced toward Cheese Station C every morning to enjoy the tasty new morsels that awaited them. But after a while, a different routine set in for the little people. Hem and Haw awoke each day a little later, dressed a little slower, and walked to Cheese Station C. After all, they knew where the cheese was now and how to get there. They had no idea where the cheese came from or who put it there. They just assumed it would be there. As soon as Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C each morning, they settled in and made themselves at home. They hung up their jogging suits, put on their running shoes, put away their running shoes, and put on their slippers. They were becoming very comfortable now that they had found the cheese. This is great, Hem said. There's enough cheese here to last us forever. The little people felt happy and successful and thought they were now secure. It wasn't long before Hem and Haw regarded the cheese they found at Cheese Station C as their cheese. It was much It was such a large store of cheese that they eventually moved their homes to be closer to it and built a social life around it. To make themselves feel more at home, Hem and Haw decorated the walls with sayings and even drew pictures of cheese around them, which made them smile. One read, Happy Having cheese makes you happy. That's what it read. Having cheese makes you happy. What makes you happy? Type it in the chat. What makes you happy? Let's see. Sometimes Hem and Haw would take their friends by to see their pile of cheese at Cheese Station C and point to it with pride, saying, Pretty nice cheese, huh? Sometimes they shared it with their friends and sometimes they didn't. We deserve this cheese, Hem said. We certainly had to work long and hard enough to find it. He picked up a nice fresh of pea piece and ate it. Afterward, Hem fell asleep, as he often did. Every night the little people would waddle home, full of cheese, and every morning they would confidently return for more. They went on for quite some time. After a while, Hem's and Haw's confidence grew into the arrogance of success. Soon they became so comfortable they didn't even notice what was happening. They didn't notice what was happening. As time went on, Sniff and Scurry continued their routine. They arrived early each morning and sniffed and scratched and scurried around Cheese Station C, inspecting the area to see if there had been any changes from the day before. Then they would sit down to nibble on the cheese. One morning, they arrived at Cheese Station C and discovered there was no cheese. They were surprised, since Sniff and Scurry had noticed the supply of cheese had been getting smaller every day. They were prepared for the inevitable, and knew instinctively what to do. They looked at each other, removed their running shoes they had tied together and hung conveniently around their necks, put them on their feet, and laced them up. The mice did not overanalyze things. To the mice, the problem and the answer were both simple. The situation at Cheese Station C had changed, so Sniff and Scurry decided to change. They both looked out into the maze. Then Sniff lifted his nose, sniffed, and nodded to Scurry, who took off running through the maze, while Sniff followed as fast as he could. They were quickly off in search of new cheese. Later that same day, Hem and Haw arrived at Cheese Station C. They had not been paying attention to the small changes that had been taking place each day, so they took it for granted their cheese would be there. They were unprepared for what they found. What? No cheese? Yelled Hem. He continued yelling, "No cheese! No cheese!" as though if he shouted louder enough, someone would put it back. "Who moved my cheese?" he hollered. Finally, he put his hands on his hips. His face turned red, and he screamed at the top of his voice, "It's not fair!" Haw just shook his head in disbelief. He, too, had counted on finding cheese at Cheese Station C. He stood there for a long time, frozen with shock. He was just not ready for this. Hem was yelling something, but Haw didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to deal with what was facing him, so he just turned everything out. He tuned everything out. The little people's behavior was not very attractive or productive, but it was understandable. Finding cheese wasn't easy, and it meant a great deal more to the little people than just having enough of it to eat every day. Finding cheese was the little people's way of getting what they thought they needed to be happy. They had their own ideas of what cheese meant to them, depending on their taste. For some, finding cheese was having material things. For others, it was enjoying good health or developing a spiritual sense of well being. For Haw, cheese just meant feeling safe, having a loving family someday, and living in a cozy cottage on Cheese Cheddar Lane. To him, cheese was becoming a big cheese in charge of others and owning a big house atop Camembert Hill. Because cheese was important to them, the two little people spent a long time trying to decide what to do. All they could think of was to keep looking around Cheese Station C, the cheeseless station, to see if the cheese was really gone. While Sniff and Scurry had quickly moved on, Hem and Haw continued to hem and haw. They ranted and raved at the injustice of it all. Haw started to get depressed. What would happen if the cheese wasn't there tomorrow? He had made future plans based on this cheese. The little people couldn't believe it. How could this have happened? No one had warned them. It wasn't right. It was not the way things were supposed to be. Hem and Haw went home that night hungry and discouraged. But before they left, Haw wrote on the wall, "The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it." I read that again. The more important your cheese is to you, the more you want to hold on to it. Food for thought. The next day, Hem and Haw left their homes and returned to Cheese Station C again, where they still expected somehow to find their cheese. The situation hadn't changed. The cheese was no longer there. The little people didn't know what to do. Hem and Haw just stood there, immobilized like two statues. Haw shut his eyes as tight as he could and put his hands over his ears. He just wanted to block out everything. He didn't want to know the cheese supply had gradually been getting smaller. He believed it had been removed all of a sudden. Hem analyzed the situation over and over. Eventually, his complicated brain, with its huge belief system, took hold. "Why did they do this to me?" he demanded. "What really was going on?" Finally, Haw opened his eyes, looked around, and said, "By the way, where are Sniff and Scurry? Do you think they knew something we don't?" Hem scoffed. "What would they know?" Hem continued, "They're just mice. They just respond to what happens. We're little people. We're smarter than mice. We should be able to figure this out." "I know we're smarter," Haw said, "but we don't seem to be acting smarter at the moment. Things are changing around here, Hem. Maybe we need to change and do things differently." "Why should we change?" Hem said. "We're little people. We're special. This sort of things should not happen to us. Or, if it does, we should at least get some benefits." "Why should we get benefits?" Haw asked. "Because we're entitled," Hem claimed. "Entitled to what?" Haw wanted to know. "We're entitled to our cheese." "Why?" Haw asked. "Because we didn't cause this problem," Hem said. "Somebody else did this and we should get something out of it," Haw suggested. Maybe we should simply stop analyzing the situation so much and go find some new cheese. Oh no, Hem argued. I'm going to get to the bottom of this. While Hem and Haw were still trying to decide what to do, Sniff and Scurry were already well on their way. They were further into the maze, up and down corridors, looking for cheese in every cheese station they could find. They didn't think of anything else but finding new cheese. They didn't find any for some time until they finally went into an area of the maze where they had never been before. Cheese Station N. They squealed with delight. They found what they had been looking for, a great supply of new cheese. They could hardly believe their eyes. It was the biggest store of cheese the mice had ever seen. In the meantime, Hem and Haw were still back at Cheese Station C, evaluating their situation. They were now suffering from the effects of having no cheese. They were becoming about frustrated and angry and were blaming each other for the situation they were in. Now and then Haw thought about his mice friends, Sniff and Scurry, and wondered if they had found any cheese yet. They believed they might be having a hard time, as running through the maze usually involved some uncertainty. But he also knew that it was likely to only last for a while. Sometimes Haw would imagine Sniff and Scurry finding new cheese and enjoying it. He thought about how good it would be for him to be out on an adventure in the maze and to find fresh new cheese. He could almost taste it. The more clearly Haw saw the image of himself finding and enjoying the new cheese, the more he saw himself leaving Cheese Station C. Let's go, he exclaimed all of a sudden. No, Hem quickly responded. I like it here. It's comfortable. It's what I know. Besides, it's dangerous out there. No, it isn't, Haw argued. Where we have run through many parts of the maze before, and we can do it again. I'm getting too old for that, Hem said, and I'm afraid I'm not interested in getting lost and making a fool of myself. Are you? With that, Haw's fear of failing returned, and his hope of finding new cheese faded. Every day, the little people continued to do what they had done before. They went to Cheese Station C, found no cheese, and returned home, carrying their worries and frustrations with them. They tried to deny what was happening, but found it harder to get to sleep, had less energy the next day, and were becoming irritable. Their homes were not the nurturing places they once were. The little people had difficulty sleeping and were having nightmares about not finding any cheese. So we'll stop here for today. I hope you are enjoying the reading and give you an opportunity to reflect on your current situation right now. Are you saying something like him, or are you being like her? Whichever case it may be, there are times in our lives when we are faced with either of these characters, and it's what we do will make a difference. So continue to enjoy the reading, and I believe that you will take something valuable from it. Do subscribe to this channel, like and share with your friends, and come back again. Make your comments so that we can make improvement to the channel. Be sure to check the description area for different links that are mentioned. And I enjoyed your company, and I hope to see you again. So until then, lead, inspire, and smile. See you. Bye bye.